Welcome to a special edition of Bowl First. I'm Jarrod Kimber. You might have noticed we haven't done as many Bowl Firsts recently. That's because at this point in the tournament, a lot of the games kind of just... It's not that they don't matter, but there isn't a bigger theme for me to have a look at. So what I'm going to try and do on the show is look at some other things. So you noticed a couple of days ago we had an interview with Brad Hodge talking about how hard it is to bat at number 4 in T20 cricket. Yesterday we had the power play dip and what happens just after the power play. So we're looking at a few other things. But today we wanted to look at this league as it currently stands because I think it's at a really, really interesting time. And what I wanted to do is just have a look at the tiers because the teams are kind of naturally shifting themselves into my hands, apparently. They're naturally shifting themselves into 3 different areas, and it's quite interesting. So tier 1 is kind of obvious. There are 3 teams with 5 wins, and they are a distance away from the 4th team at this stage, which has 3 wins, although that's only from 6 games. So it seems to me that Chennai, Delhi and RCB are just a cut above. Now, they might all struggle for the second part of the season, that's more than fine, but they also almost have enough wins to guarantee themselves playoff spots already. So that's a huge, huge advantage. Now, none of these teams are perfect, but they're all really, really good. Chennai and Bangalore both have incredibly long batting lineups at time. Chennai has a very interesting bowling options to them. Delhi has brilliant top order and just a combination, like a squad of incredible bowling options that they can bring out at any time, which means that they should be able to suit any pitch. I think there are also plenty of smaller faults with these teams, but compared to all the other teams we're going to talk about, there's certainly the core makes sense and the team actually works as a full 11, which isn't always the case. The biggest problem with T20 franchise teams really is that they don't work as a full 11 because you're pulling pieces from different parts of auctions and whatever. It's not like an international team. An international team's always easier because you can just pick the best 11 players. That's not how franchise cricket works with the overseas players and everything. So it means that the balance is a little bit just more topsy-turvy at times. These 3 teams though, because of their depth in different areas, I think have been able to overcome that. They should be able to win enough games to easily get into the playoffs, if not completely street away the way that they're going at the moment. If you think about this, the only way that RCB couldn't get to 7 wins from here is to go 1-6 over the second half of the season. And there's no way that RCB could ever pull anything like that off. Apologies in advance to all RCB fans for the inevitable. So that's tier 1. It's really quite obviously at the top. I'm going to skip tier 2 for a minute and just go down to tier 3. If the Sunrisers beat the Royals in their game on Sunday, the bottom of the table, there'll be 3 teams on 2 and 5, with the Kings on 3 and 4. Punjab's next 2 games are against DC and RCB. You would assume that they're playing 2 teams in the top 3 and they're in the lower part of the table. If they can come out of those 2 games 1-1, I think that they'd be more than happy with that. If they could somehow steal both of them, it would be exceptional. But you'd be hoping for at least 1 win if you're in the Kings camp. That means at that stage they'll be 4 and 5 going ahead. That keeps them within touching distance of the top 4 teams. If they lose both those games, of course, they'll be 3 and 6 and they'll be right back in tier 2 with the other strugglers. Weirdly enough, KKR's next 2 opponents are these same 2 teams. Now they're 1 win behind Punjab. They definitely have to go 1-1. They actually probably have to push to win both of those games if at all possible because they want to be at 4 and 5 as well. You really don't want to be at 3 and 6. You certainly, if you're at 2 and 7, then I don't know, put the curtains up. I don't know what put the curtains up means, really. I don't think it's a good thing, though, is it? No one wants to put curtains up. I think that's what it means. Now, the Royals play the Sunrisers next. Let's say that they win that game. After that, they've got to play CSK and Mumbai. They could easily, again, lose both of those. Now, and that's them at 3 and 6 and little chance of getting into the finals for them. If they lose to the Sunrisers, I kind of think that's it. Their team is falling apart because of injury. It's not completely their fault. I don't think it was a brilliant squad to begin with, but losing 2 automatic starting overseas players just makes that all worse. The Sunrisers, let's say the Sunrisers beat the Royals. After that, they've got Mumbai and Chennai. If the Sunrisers lose to the Royals, they have to go 6 and 1 to end up with 7 wins. It's not likely. I'm not saying 7 wins is the magic point because you're never quite sure what the magic point is, but 7 is the absolute bare minimum that you have to get. If the Sunrisers beat the Royals, their next games are against Mumbai and Chennai. So it's still tough after that. I think they have to win 2 of their next 3 whoever it is, even if they have to somehow find a way to beat Chennai at this stage, they just don't have the choice. They are that far behind the other teams. They're behind the struggling teams. They're 2 wins behind the Kings at this stage. They have to win 2 of their next 3 to just stay afloat, let alone in this tournament. It already looks beyond them, let's be honest, but there's something to their team. So that's tier 3, which is essentially the bottom 4 team. And tier 2 is Mumbai completely on their own. Now, I've put Mumbai on their own for a couple of different reasons. One, not sure I'm getting a good read on where this team is going at the moment. It still, on paper, to me, looks like a very talented team. The fact that they dropped Ishan Kishan makes me feel really nervous. The fact that they'd already moved him in the order also makes me feel a little bit queasy. And so I'm not 100% sure on Mumbai. So I've got them there. At the moment, they've got as many wins as Punjab, but from a game less. 4th spot is theoretically at this stage in their grasp. Even if they were to be 70% as good as we think they can be over the next few games, they have a real chance of just winning a couple of games and putting a gap between them and Punjab and the other tier 3 teams. The other thing about Mumbai is I want you to think about how you would feel if you're one of the 4 teams at the bottom and you're looking at, you've got a sub 500 record, so you haven't won even 50% of your games yet. And you know that you're probably not going to be able to catch the teams at the top. So the 4th spot is your only real chance of getting in the playoffs at the moment, unless you go on an absolute tear. The absolute worst case scenario must be to look up and see Mumbai in that 4th place spot. It's an awkward team to go up against. You would assume that even if Mumbai are poor, they're going to win a few games over the back half of that season, and they're going to make it very, very hard. And there's a reason why the other teams are sub 500 in their records. It's because they're not perfectly put together teams. But it's also very worthwhile looking at this league. This is a short league, and the teams are sort of artificially put together through the auctions and through other things to be roughly of the same quality. I know it doesn't always work out that way, but there's a lot less variation in between the best team and the worst team in the IPL than there is in many other sporting leagues around the world. The actual level of quality of players is not that far removed. That doesn't mean that you don't get a team that's much better than the other teams, but it means that a team can go on a bit of a tear. And in a short tournaments like this, and 14 games is such a small tournament, and it means that you have the ability to go on a tear and win 2, 3, 4 games in a row. The other thing about this particular league this year, because they're staying on the same pitch for a bunch of games in a row, if you get a pitch that really favors your team and maybe doesn't favor your opposition as well, you can win 2 in a row, 3 in a row, maybe even 4 in a row before other teams have even sort of woken up to what is happening. That is very, very possible. But at the moment, you would bet on the top 4 teams to go through here. There's no team underneath them, even with the Kings' really good win against RCB. There is no team outside that top 4 at the moment that you would be massively confident is going to go into that top 4. We have a tier 1 of those top 3 teams. We have a tier 2 of Mumbai, and then we have the strugglers underneath. Any one of those 4 strugglers could get going. If you look at the Kings, if you look at KKR and you look at Sunrisers, they all have combinations of incredible players that could go on an absolute Andre Russell could just score 300 runs in his next 3 games and everything changes. You've got KL Rahul and Chris Gale who have won a couple of games now for the Kings, and the Sunrisers. Look at their 4 overseas players. Their 4 overseas players, their top 3 could go absolutely ballistic, and Rashid Khan could start taking a lot more wickets. There's no reason why those teams can't get better. It's just that as it stands at the moment, it's a bit of a problem because it does look like the top 4 teams are going to go through. This is a short season. It's going to feel like a very long season if Mumbai win their next couple of games and the teams below them can't get their act together. That is where the problem is here at the moment. But T20 is so wildly unpredictable, and that's the great thing. And we've seen what an oversized reaction 8 injury can play in this series as well. You know, Sunrisers would love to get Bhuvi back out on the field and bowl, and they've already lost Natarajan. They've kind of lost a bit of their bowling there. A couple of injuries to some of the higher up teams in similar kind of positions where they're a little bit weaker could really be interesting going forward. But at the moment, it does look like we've got Tier 1, Mumbai, and then the guys who aren't going to make the finals. We'll see you here tomorrow.